At 7:42 a.m. on January 29, 2026, the world woke to a statement that would reverberate through Buckingham Palace, Downing Street, and royal households across the globe. No private foundation established after departure from royal duty is permitted to trade explicitly or implicitly on the authority, symbolism, or privileges of the crown, read the statement attributed to Princess Anne. Within minutes, Buckingham Palace confirmed the wording, sending shockwaves through royal observers, the media, and most importantly, the Sussex household. This was not a press release. It was a declaration of principle, a line drawn in the sand. If you want to understand how a $200 administrative oversight could ignite an international royal scandal, stay tuned. Because what unfolded next redefined public service, celebrity, and accountability in the 21st century monarchy. The first question was obvious. Why now? Royal investigators operating under a review jointly authorized by Princess Anne and Prince William had compiled a dossier examining the Archewell Foundation, its finances, branding, and most controversially, the couple's recent international engagements. Central to the storm was a January trip to Nigeria. Archewell, the foundation established by Harry and Meghan in 2020, had been flagged as non-compliant, barred from participating in fundraising or charitable grant-making, and had failed to submit its financial report due in January. The missed renewal fee since February 2023, though seemingly minor, had triggered a cascade of regulatory scrutiny. Charity Watch's records revealed that in 2022, Archewell experienced an $11 million drop in donations compared to the previous year. The rising expenses, according to sources, stemmed largely from royal-style international tour to Nigeria and Colombia. Princess Anne cited data from the U.S. Internal Revenue Service showing Archewell faced unprecedented financial penalties in 2024, while donations and grants sharply declined. Operating costs reported $5.1 million, up from $3.3 million in 2023, while total donations received plummeted from $5.73 million to $2.1 million. Salaries alone accounted for $913,000, and other operational expenses soared from $1 million to $2.9 million. Net revenue after expenses fell to $2.5 million, compared to a $24 million surplus the previous year. The palace's concern was not solely financial. Internal sources flagged the Nigeria trip after officials confirmed that Harry and Meghan had received diplomatic-grade facilitation, typically reserved for active working royals, expedited visas, secure accommodations, military-escorted transfers, and special airport corridors. Archewell at the time had been legally restricted from fundraising due to the overdue renewal fee, a technical lapse that made the extravagance of the trip impossible to ignore. One palace aide reportedly asked, "How does a foundation barred from financial operations generate a trip with royal-tier treatment, while its founders insist they act independently of the crown?" Royal lawyers cross-referenced compliance logs with public filings from U.S. regulators in California and Florida, states where Archewell's charitable status had come under review. The overlap was striking. Internal memoranda matched U.S. data, falling donations, rising operational costs, shrinking staff numbers, and notices warning of potential closure. Anne's inquiry focused not on Archewell's existence, but on whether Harry and Meghan blurred the line between private philanthropy and royal representation, a distinction the monarchy holds sacred. The investigation's scope included which Nigerian ministries were contacted, whether British diplomatic staff were approached, whether royal titles were referenced, and whether Archewell communications implied official royal backing. Sources emphasized these were constitutional, not branding issues. Prince William's involvement was deliberate and measured. As Prince of Wales, he oversees multiple crown-linked charitable portfolios, from environmental initiatives like Earthshot to homelessness programs under Homewards, all operating under strict governance, audited accounts, board oversight, and defined royal participation hours. By contrast, Harry and Meghan, though unpaid leaders of Archewell, declared spending an average of 1 hour per week on foundation work, yet international tour and ceremonial treatment suggested de facto royal authority. The inconsistency raised questions across the palace. Was the line between private philanthropy and royal service being manipulated? Anne, known as the monarchy's strictest custodian of protocol, reportedly demanded letters clarifying Archewell was not crown-affiliated, how travel privileges were requested, and whether any promotional materials suggested royal endorsement. Failure to comply could escalate to restrictions on the use of titles in charitable branding. Public reaction moved faster than the palace. Polls in late January showed approval ratings for the Sussexes hovering near 22%, while Princess Anne registered above 68%. Online commentary framed the dispute as a clash of philosophies: tradition versus branding, stewardship versus self-promotion, service versus spectacle. Anne's intervention was deliberate, signaling a strict separation between the crown and private enterprise. She, long regarded as unyielding in matters of protocol, was reportedly furious that public confusion persisted over whether Harry and Meghan acted on Britain's behalf abroad. Royal investigators quietly continued their work, compiling financial and regulatory data, cross-referencing American and British records. The palace was not rushing to prosecution, but a warning had been sent. The monarchy would not tolerate its image being leveraged for private gain. Archewell may run as a foundation. Harry and Meghan may fundraise or tour internationally, but not in the shadow of the crown. The line had been drawn, and the consequences would soon follow. The stage was set, the public intrigued, and the royal family poised to reclaim authority. As royal investigators delved deeper into Archewell, internal sources began revealing troubling patterns. Former staff members, speaking on condition of anonymity, described a culture of blurred lines, where the foundation's global initiatives were promoted as royal outreach, while day-to-day operations struggled under mismanagement and unclear directives. We were instructed to present visits as official royal engagements, but when we asked for guidance, there were no clear rules, one former employee said. Events were often adjusted last minute, flags displayed, venues secured, and ceremonial protocols added, creating a facade of authority. Yet behind the scenes, the foundation's charitable obligations were neglected, paperwork delayed, and oversight absent. Financial documents obtained by palace auditors and U.S. regulators revealed a troubling decline. Donations, once robust, had plummeted from $13 million in 2021 to under $500,000 in 2022. Staff layoffs quietly followed, projects were frozen, and operational spending surged. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan maintained an image of de facto royalty on international tour, meeting dignitaries, visiting orphanages, and conducting photo ops, often accompanied by military or diplomatic personnel. The contrast between public spectacle and internal reality was stark, raising alarms about the ethical implications of implied royal authority without accountability. Princess Anne, known for her uncompromising adherence to protocol, viewed the situation as a constitutional and reputational issue. Public communications from Archewell often included phrases, logos, and imagery that could reasonably be interpreted as royal endorsement. Social media posts, podcasts, and event invitations repeatedly suggested official status, blurring lines between private enterprise and monarchy. One audit found that over 60% of Archewell's public materials could be interpreted by the public as implicitly supported by the crown. Anne reportedly described the strategy as deliberate, not accidental, noting, "One cannot celebrate the institution while rejecting its rules. That is branding, not memory." Meanwhile, Prince William and senior palace advisors quietly coordinated a legal framework to protect the crown. Discussions focused on whether Harry and Meghan's use of royal titles in fundraising, public appearances, and media ventures constituted misrepresentation. While stripping the couple of Duke and Duchess titles entirely was politically sensitive, restrictions could be implemented on promotional and charitable materials, ensuring no private enterprise could operate under the illusion of royal authority. The palace's strategy emphasized transparency, accountability, and the separation of personal brand from institutional credibility. Public sentiment began to shift rapidly. Media coverage moved beyond scandal to focus on governance, ethics, and public trust. Opinion pieces highlighted the contrast between the Sussexes' branding efforts and the silent, consistent work of other royals. Princess Anne's decades-long commitment to save the children, Catherine's focus on early childhood development, and Edward's Commonwealth engagements were showcased as examples of genuine service. The palace emphasized that true royalty was defined not by titles or tour, but by sustained, accountable action. Polls reflected this shift. Anne's approval rating climbed to 74%, Catherine's trust index to 82%, while Harry and Meghan's favorability fell. The turning point emerged with a rare public address by Princess Anne at St. James's Palace, flanked by legal counsel and the Royal Foundation's ethics chair. Calm, measured, and resolute, she articulated the palace's position. The monarchy would no longer tolerate ambiguity in public representation. Archewell had crossed a line by implying royal authority without regulatory compliance. Anne's words were clear. Transparency, rectification, and public clarification were expected. The weight of her statement reverberated internationally, particularly in Commonwealth nations, where implied royal endorsement carries symbolic and practical influence. Meghan Markle's response, delivered via a California-based women's leadership panel, was measured but pointed. She positioned Archewell as a humanitarian movement, emphasizing empathy and social impact while subtly portraying herself as constrained by outdated institutional controls. The audience applauded, yet analysts noted a careful omission. No mention of the Nigeria trip, royal titles, or financial lapses. In the UK, the silence spoke volumes, signaling the palace had regained narrative control. Leaders in Nigeria, Canada, and New Zealand reaffirmed commitments to transparency and partnerships, emphasizing that any association with royal branding must be clearly defined. The palace continued reinforcing its stance behind the scenes. Communications audits, internal memos, and cross-referenced regulatory filings underscored the seriousness of the oversight. Archewell's inability to maintain compliance, coupled with strategic branding implying royal authority, represented a threat not only to public trust, but to the institution itself. The monarchy's approach combined procedural rigor with moral clarity. Public spectacle without accountability would no longer be tolerated. The message was unmistakable. The Crown values service, not performance, duty, not marketing, and adherence to principle above personal or commercial gain. As the palace's internal investigation unfolded, public attention intensified. Headlines no longer focused solely on scandal or celebrity. They dissected governance, ethics, and institutional integrity. Newspapers and online platforms debated what responsible royal representation meant in a modern age. Analysts pointed out the stark contrast between the Sussexes' global tour under the guise of de facto royalty and the quiet, disciplined work of Princess Anne, Catherine, and Edward. Social media amplified the debate, with hashtags like royal accountability trending across the United Kingdom and Commonwealth nations. Public trust was now a tangible metric, one that shifted daily with each revelation. Archewell's communication team attempted to counter the growing narrative. Carefully curated posts highlighted charitable projects, international panels, and speaking engagements. Language was precise, emphasizing humanitarian intent, social impact, and a commitment to global progress. Yet the omission of disclaimers about royal status, coupled with imagery reminiscent of official royal branding, created ambiguity that only fueled palace concerns. Former staffers confirmed that internal guidance on messaging was intentionally flexible, allowing founders to imply prestige while avoiding direct falsehoods. The subtlety of the strategy, however, did not escape public or regulatory scrutiny. In response, Buckingham Palace adopted a two-pronged approach. Internally, legal teams finalized frameworks to clarify the permissible use of royal titles, insignia, and implied endorsement. These measures included precise documentation for any royal-affiliated engagement, biannual financial audits of connected projects, and compliance checks before international travel. Externally, a carefully orchestrated media strategy highlighted the accomplishments of reigning royals. Short documentaries showcased Princess Anne's disaster relief missions, Catherine's early childhood initiatives, and Edward's conservation efforts. Each release was devoid of fanfare, emphasizing sustained action over public spectacle, subtly reinforcing the palace's standards while contrasting them with Archewell's high-profile activities. The tipping point arrived when Princess Anne addressed the public at St. James's Palace. Her words were deliberate, measured, and piercingly clear. The monarchy would no longer tolerate ambiguity in representation. Archewell, she stated, had engaged in activities that could be interpreted as royal endorsement without authorization. The call for transparency, rectification, and immediate clarification was explicit. This address resonated globally, particularly in countries where the monarchy's symbolic authority remained influential. International media framed the moment as a decisive assertion of institutional integrity over personal branding. Public reaction was swift. Polling indicated 73% of UK respondents supported the palace's stance, while only 18% sympathized with Meghan and Harry's position. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle conducted a counteroffensive through media appearances and public addresses. Emphasizing empathy, social impact, and humanitarian principles, she framed Archewell as a movement for change, subtly implying obstruction by outdated structures. Her tone was measured, visually composed, and emotionally resonant, yet carefully avoided mention of Nigeria, financial irregularities, or formal royal titles. Analysts noted the strategic precision. The response appealed to audiences attuned to narrative and identity, rather than evidence and compliance. Yet within the UK, the silence spoke volumes, further solidifying public perception that the monarchy had regained control of the narrative. Internally, Prince William coordinated with senior advisors to implement what would later be known as the Transparency Charter. This directive codified 5 core principles: clarity of role, financial audit trails, separation of brand and duty, pre-visit compliance for international engagements, and digital accountability. Each measure was designed to prevent ambiguity in public-facing operations, ensuring no individual could leverage royal association for private gain. Letters demanding full disclosure, suspension of implied royal endorsement, and compliance with legal standards were dispatched to the Sussexes. The palace made clear that failure to adhere would result in immediate institutional distancing and revocation of all symbolic privileges. Public discourse evolved from curiosity to principled debate. Newspapers, talk shows, and online forums analyzed not just Archewell's activities, but the broader implications for monarchy in the 21st century. Commentators contrasted transient celebrity influence with enduring institutional duty, repeatedly citing Princess Anne's decades-long service as the benchmark for responsible representation. Social sentiment mirrored these discussions. Online polls reflected rising confidence in the monarchy, with Anne's approval at 74% and Catherine at 82%. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan's favorability ratings declined, signaling that public opinion now favored transparency and accountability over charisma or branding. The 14-day deadline passed without response from Harry or Meghan. Silence filled the spaces where explanations, audits, or apologies should have been. The palace, unwavering, moved with deliberate precision. Within hours, the official royal website was updated. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex were no longer authorized to engage in any activities under royal title or branding, domestically or internationally. It was a final, symbolic severance, the culmination of months of investigation, internal deliberation, and public observation. The decision was backed unanimously by King Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Prince William, a united front projecting institutional strength, clarity, and procedural authority. This act was far more than administrative. It represented a philosophical reclamation. The crown would not be a backdrop for private enterprise, no matter the prestige or public attention it could generate. Harry, stripped of formal privileges, faced a new reality. In American political and legal spheres, his identity as a former working royal carried diminished weight. Visa negotiations and international engagements that once relied on implied royal status were now complicated by the absence of formal endorsement. Meghan, likewise, lost the remaining tether connecting her platform to the crown. Netflix paused production on her historical dramatization, pending clarification on usage rights for royal imagery. Archewell, once a vehicle for global visibility, became subject to scrutiny and diminished credibility. Princess Catherine's response, though understated, carried immense symbolic weight. She visited a children's hospice in Sussex, wearing no crown or designer statement, only a silver pendant inherited from Queen Elizabeth. She smiled, listened, and held the hands of terminally ill children, demonstrating a quiet, consistent commitment to service. There were no speeches, no press releases, no orchestrated photo ops, only presence, empathy, and duty. The press understood. This was the standard the monarchy now demanded. Public polling reflected the impact. 87% of UK respondents supported the final severance. 68% argued that the royal family had waited too long to act, while Meghan's public trust fell below 20% outside celebrity circles. Harry and Meghan, once operating in the liminal space between royal privilege and independence, were now officially and symbolically outsiders. The palace then implemented systemic reforms to prevent future ambiguity. The Transparency Charter, announced days prior, became operational. It codified rules for clarity of role, financial audit trails, separation of brand and duty, pre-visit compliance for international engagements, and digital accountability. Letters were dispatched to any royal-affiliated entities outlining requirements for transparency, traceability, and formal authorization. No royal individual could engage in public initiatives implying endorsement without explicit written approval. These measures ensured that the Crown's reputation, authority, and moral standing could not be leveraged for private gain or branding. Public opinion stabilized around these reforms. Media outlets shifted tone from sensationalism to analysis, exploring the broader implications for monarchy in the modern era. Articles emphasized principled governance over celebrity narratives, highlighting the contrast between ephemeral influence and sustained institutional duty. Social media debates, once polarized, coalesced around standards of accountability, reinforcing the monarchy's legitimacy. Royal commentators underscored the symbolic importance of Anne and Catherine's visible commitment to service, framing them as exemplars of the Crown's renewed focus on transparency, integrity, and ethical representation. As Harry and Meghan receded from the sphere of authorized royal activity, the monarchy pivoted toward internal consolidation. Princess Anne, William, Catherine, and Edward began rebuilding the institution on principles of restraint, transparency, and consistent service. Recruitment, training, and oversight mechanisms for royal representatives were strengthened. International visits were meticulously planned, legal frameworks updated, and public communications rigorously reviewed to prevent misinterpretation. The royal household now operated with the explicit understanding that public trust is earned, maintained, and never leveraged as a marketing tool. The final act of this unfolding saga was not court filings, press conferences, or social media rebuttals. It was a quiet removal from websites, official records, public duties, and symbolic presence. In this silence, the monarchy spoke volumes. The Sussexes' absence was no longer scandalous, it was instructive. It illustrated the consequences of blending private enterprise with institutional authority and set a precedent for the future. The public, attuned to both spectacle and substance, witnessed a reinvigoration of royal standards. Where ambiguity had reigned, clarity now prevailed. Where perception once blurred with reality, transparency, and accountability became the defining markers of modern monarchy. The narrative was no longer about celebrity or notoriety. It was about duty, service, and ethical stewardship. The monarchy had drawn its line, enforced its principles, and communicated the weight of responsibility to all who might act under its banner. In the months that followed, the Crown's renewed posture resonated globally. Public trust increased, charitable engagement flourished under clear governance, and a modern standard of representation was firmly established. The era of ambiguity had ended. The monarchy, guided by principle and accountability, had reclaimed both its narrative and its moral authority, signaling a clean, deliberate start for a new chapter.